Hello, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to welcome you all to the webinar on Taboo to Virtue, Finding the Balance for Crypto in India. This is the second webinar by the eCareer Process Center on Internet and Digital Economy after a very successful first webinar on getting CBDC right for India. My name is Deepak Mishra, and I'm the Director and Chief Executive of eCareer. Today's topic needs little motivation. Like cricket, I feel like most Indians now have a view on crypto and they're not shy about expressing them. The enthusiasm and the cynicism surrounding this topic has no limit. Therefore, you may wonder why an economic think tank like eCareer is wading into such a controversial topic. Part of the reason is our partner process, who have encouraged us to get into area where we did not dare to go before. So thank you, process. And the other part of the reason is crypto has become mainstream. India is one of the fastest growing crypto markets in the world. About 20 million Indians are estimated to have either owned or exchanged crypto in 2021 alone. Its proponents think crypto in their emerging forms and applications have the potential to revolutionize financial system. In fact, they even argue that they are the building blocks of the next internet. So if India aspires to be part of this big innovation, it must adopt a positive approach to cryptos, non-fungible tokens, metaverse, so on and so forth. But the opponents are equally critical. RBI Governor Shaktikant Das said that cryptocurrencies do not have any underlying value, not equilibrium. ECB chairperson Christine Lagarde recently commented that crypto is worth nothing. And Janet Yellen, US Treasury Secretary, has been on record that stable coins such as Terra USD pose rapidly growing risk for the traditional financial sector. So much noise, so little wisdom. And that's the motivation for today's webinar. We have invited three very eminent experts on this topic who will approach the issue from three unique perspectives. Dr. Amar Patnaik, the Member of Parliament in Rajya Sabha from Odisha, who will be joining us shortly, will provide the policymakers' perspective. Mr. Nishith Desai, a renowned international lawyer, author, lecturer, researcher, innovator, and a thought leader, will present the industry's viewpoint. And Dr. Debayan Gupta, Assistant Professor of Computer Science at Ashoka University, will bring the technology angle to this discourse. It's a real pleasure to welcome Dr. Patnaik, Mr. Desai, and Dr. Gupta to this webinar. And finally, we have a moderator par excellence. Ira Dugal actually needs no introduction. She is a journalist and currently the executive editor of Bloomberg Quint. Her interest includes the economy, banking, and markets. She has previously worked at Mint, Financial Express, NDTV, CNBC Asia, and she holds a master's in business journalism from NYU. So I'm delighted to pass on the mic to Ira, and many thanks to our viewers for their kind attention. Over to you, Ira.
Deepak, thank you so much. As you said, this is a topic which everyone has an opinion on. There was a poll done by somebody on, whether they think crypto should be viewed positively or negatively. The results notwithstanding, I think 80% of the people who voted in that poll had never had anything to do with crypto. So it just goes to show that whether you understand the technology, whether you understand the use cases or not, everyone has an opinion. But I think the idea here would be to try and get an informed opinion and use that from a policy making perspective as well. So I will actually first perhaps request Debayan. The reason for that being that it's important to understand the underlying technology and the way the underlying technology is developing as well. Because Debayan will agree with me that what was seen as crypto 5 years back is no longer the same universe today, and on a constant basis, change is sort of very central to what we have now come to know as cryptocurrencies.
That's absolutely true. I think, how many hours do I have? No, I'll try and give a quick overview of how I see the situation developing, right? I think a lot of people think cryptocurrencies are this computer science thingamajig, I think that's the wrong way to look at it. We computer scientists, especially the more mathy types, we'll throw in lots of jargon to make ourselves seem more intelligent, and then we'll confuse everyone. That's not the way to do it. I think the best way to look at what's going on right now, all this talk about blockchains and cryptography and digital currencies and all of this stuff, is to understand that these are not necessarily advances in computing. What has happened is these are advances in accounting systems that are enabled by computing. And accounting systems are critical. The last time there was a big change in accounting that was double entry bookkeeping, the Venetians got super rich, right? So there's something new that has happened, right? There are some clever people who've come up with a lot of clever ideas. And what they've managed to enable is the ability to have a public ledger. And this is something we'd never had before. If I keep money in a bank and there's some evil employee at the bank, or the government is against me or something of that sort, they can always fiddle the numbers around a little, right? Like now you need to do a forensic audit to find out if something went wrong. And that's basically impossible for the average person. So there are certain advances that have occurred in technology that allows us to have a guaranteed system that an individual or an evil authority cannot mess around with, right? So it's decentralized. So 50% of the people in the system would need to plot against you individually in order to break your account. Let's put it that way. That doesn't prevent you from other kinds of hacks. If someone breaks into your phone, they can still say, sell all my assets or whatever. That's different. But the authority can be decentralized. That's where a lot of this is coming from. The ability to have a public ledger which cannot be meddled by some evil authority on top. Once you have that, people started doing lots of clever things with it, right? This has nothing to do with privacy. A lot of stuff is actually public, right? You have these permission blockchains also where you have to identify yourself before you get in. So all of these other things were added on afterwards, and you ended up with a very, very interesting system. See, with modern cryptocurrencies, people don't know quite what to make of it because they don't quite behave like what we think of as currencies, right? They're somewhere between a currency and a commodity. Why does Bitcoin have value? The vast majority of people who purchase Bitcoins some people would call it the greater fool's fallacy. Then 99% of people, as you mentioned, 80%, whatever, if I purchase a Bitcoin or some percentage of one, I'm not doing it because I understand what's going on. I'm buying it at 100 rupees because I think I can sell it tomorrow at 200 rupees. That's why 99% of people are doing it. The issue that I see, both for technologists, policymakers, and legal experts alike, is that this furor is going to die down in a while. Right? It's going to take maybe 5 years, maybe a decade. After a certain point in time, the madness is going to go away. The question is, at that point in time, will India as a country be in the right position to say that, okay, there was this new technology, there was a lot of hype around it. Have we managed to catch on to the right subparts of it that actually had value? And that's a really hard problem. Are cryptocurrencies the right answer? Is central bank digital currency the cool thing to do? What about direct peer-to-peer lending systems? What about instead of going through national stock exchanges, should we just have ICOs instead of IPOs? A lot of companies are actually doing that. You'll see a lot of coins, different names. Some of them are actually basically stock offerings. They say that, look, let's not go through a digital exchange. We have this magic public ledger that I can't mess with. So we'll say that, you own 5 shares in my company. And you can prove that you were on this magic book, which is public. So that's a way to prove ownership of things. So people are actually using it as a pseudo stock exchange, right? NFTs are another way of looking at all of this stuff. Again, don't worry about the names. At the end of the day, it's a public way of saying I own something, right? So that says, hey, I own 1/5 of this painting. And you can pay money to do that. So now that we have this technology, we're just scratching at the surface of it. If anyone tells you they know what's going to happen, they're lying to you. But I think there are a couple of good rules of thumb to follow. There's actually literally a couple, two. Rule of thumb number one, this is a decentralized technology. Generally speaking, if you have a central authority that you are meant to trust, then you don't need all of this cryptocurrency blockchain stuff. You have your RBI, you have databases, you have all sorts of other things. That's one rule of thumb. The second is, once you have these systems, it's terribly, terribly hard to regulate them, right? The reason behind that is somewhat more sociological than technical. It's simply the fact that most of us grew up without this stuff. So reasoning about these things is very hard for us. I'll give you a 30-second example before I stop, right? What has happened with these technologies is they have enabled counterintuitive computations. So for example, if I told you, hey, one value I'm interested in knowing is the average salary of everyone, all the attendees and panelists on this phone call. And we have some private information, which is our salary. And I'm saying I'll never give it out to anybody. Now, normally, most of us would think that, hey, that if nobody tells you what their salary is, how will you calculate the average? It's impossible. Except you give it to a child and they don't have our ideas about what impossible is. They'll quickly come up with the idea, hey, I take out a calculator, I add in my salary, I give it to Ira, and I add a big random number to it. I give it to Ira. Ira adds her salary and she adds a big random number, passes it over to Deepak. Deepak adds his salary and adds a big random number. Goes around. In the second round, we just subtract off all of the random numbers. We have the sum of everyone's salary and we can calculate the average. Turns out you can do this for any function whatsoever, not just average, which is a very weird thing to be able to say that we can take private data and compute on it without ever revealing anything. Blockchains, homomorphic encryption, secret sharing, there are so many different techniques that have come up in the last couple of decades that enable this sort of thing. And because it goes against our intuitions of what's possible and what's not, it's very hard to even think clearly about it, which means regulating it is an order of magnitude more difficult. So we need to be very, very, very careful to future-proof whatever regulations we make, because this stuff is changing fast, fast, fast. So I'll pause there and maybe we can have a more detailed discussion as we go.
I think that's a great place to pause. And I think that's exactly the dilemma that the policymakers are facing. They're smart enough to know that they can't shun the technology. It could very well be the technology that defines the next many years. But they're scared enough by their previous experiences of some of the applications that are being built atop this. Mr. Desai, will you pick up from here on and tell us what the evolving perspectives are in terms of policy making around this, regulation around this? Are we any closer to a consensus, or if not a consensus, are we at least moving in one direction? We were bang in the middle of let's regulate, let's ban. Are we moving a little bit in one direction or the other? Mr. Desai, I think you're on mute, sir.
No, I didn't speak more. I just say thank you so much for inviting me to this conversation. And thank you, Deepak. Thank you, Ira. And also, it was wonderful to hear Debayan. What I can do is I can't tell facts, but I can tell you perspective and my perception more so. And the way in which I'm looking at it at a very, very high level on a global scale, I think people as a whole are very disgruntled with the government. Most governments, I would say. Okay, there are exceptions maybe. And so first of all, there is a philosophical tilt to this whole crypto world that frees us from the clutches of government and the monetary policy and stuff like that. And as you all know, I think Debayan made a reference to that, that the one perspective is that there's nothing backing Bitcoin or crypto. But what's happening to the fiat currency? What is backing it? I believe in 71, Nixon dealing gold from currency. So what is there behind the dollar? Okay, now recently I understand, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Russia has linked gold to its currency and ruble has begun to change its value. Okay, I'm not an economist, but as we see that people think that, what is it backing? It's only the confidence at the most. Okay. If confidence is the currency, behind the currency, if you call it, Same thing with Bitcoin. Same thing with other, all this crypto thing, which are outside the control of the government in many ways, So I think that is where there is some kind of a hype amongst the people that we want to try this out. We don't know, okay? Government can print as many notes as they want to, and they can demonetize as well whenever they want to. Okay, so, we have seen benefits or disadvantages of demonetization and whatever it is. But I think people feel that why should my money, hard-earned money, be controlled by the government? And I'm not suggesting one or the other point of view, but there is inherent resistance in being too much controlled by the government. Again, we have been reading a lot about demise of 3 decades of globalization. Okay. Now, my perception or my perspective is that this is going to last for about 5 years. Within 5 years, we will again find what are the advantages of, what are the advantages of globalization we enjoyed, and what were the disadvantages. There will be system will correct itself in some ways or the other. Okay. And third, technology is global anyway. So today it is one thing to control the players, but other thing to control the technology. Internet could not have flourished, or it was very difficult to control internet, right? And so technology is one important thing, and Debayan is more of an expert than me. But technology allows you to do things that were never possible before. If you ask me, in the year maybe about 2000, or when the dot-com boom happened, and all of us were visualizing future world, one of the things was that there'll be shopping malls in the sky, right? And we thought it will still take a long time, but those who believed in it, and those who invested right, and those who did it, I think they are the biggest beneficiaries. They created richest people on the earth. Okay. So, it is all your risk-taking, your perception, but visualization. So same thing in terms of crypto, and I think Debayan rightly mentioned that nobody knows what's going to happen in 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now. But as we look at, and we had internal discussion, our leader of AI practice group, and he's a PhD in artificial intelligence. And his perspective was that in 25 years' time, 1 Bitcoin will be equal to $2.5 million. It is on record. If you go to our conference of 2014 on From Democracy to Netocracy on the web, he has specifically said 2.5. At that time, it was maybe less than $100. And everybody laughed. Okay. But when it became 65,000, people were scratching their head, Now, again, I'm not saying he was good, bad, worse, whatever it is. But, it is perspective could be so different. So people want to make sure they don't miss out on the future opportunity. So initially, most people who can afford to lose come into the play. And then, the whole game goes on. Anyway, I don't know how much time I have. But as I see that it is people's perception, and as I think you made a reference to the survey. Most of the people who were surveyed never owned any Bitcoin or never owned any crypto, but still. So what does that show? It shows their aspiration. They feel that this is what is going to happen, right, wrong, good or bad. But they feel that this is going to go up or go down or whatever it is. So the survey also tells you the expectations of the people, and investment is a matter of psychology, and therefore based on the expectation, people make bets. And when those who are able to lose money, so main job of a government is to see that vulnerables do not become vulnerable. That is the most important part. Number 2, it is not abused for the terror or for the other illicit purposes, drugs or whatever it is. That is where, so you control the players, intermediaries, and people like that. Now, if you ask me, crypto, and we've gone through this history of, we have specialized since 2012-13, handle all the raids, handle all the issues. Raids were conducted, and later on I got a call that, okay, what is this Bitcoin? We raided because, they are not understood that. So all the cases, police cases, including up to the Supreme Court, we went, right? And so there was not enough understanding, but there was a perception from government side or police side that there is something wrong going on. And then, of course, they find it was right. But there were some people who played a Ponzi scheme. Okay. And that's why RBI had to bring in that ban on the banks for the crypto traders. Of course, ultimately that ban we succeeded in removing. But the point is that it is the players who are to be really managed, controlled. It is crypto. In fact, some cases, crypto, you will say that it's more traceable than cash. If one terrorist hands over cash back to somebody, it's gone. Here there is a trail, and in few cases we have already got actual people who are culprit because of the trail that was there. So it is not that anonymous as people think. That is my perception, and I believe that there is a near-term future, there is medium-term. You are all better at it, but I believe it's going to be extremely volatile. But there are going to be the people who are going to invest, those who can lose. One other thing that has not happened and it has just begun to happen is institutional play. So far, it was mostly retail, and now institutions are coming up. Okay, they are setting up crypto funds. High net worth individuals are putting certain amount of money in, playing with this currency, and so therefore it is very volatile. But as we move forward, the volatility now, people have really learned lesson that it could be $65,000, it could be 30,000 next day. Better be careful. So people have learned hard lessons as well. So it is going to teach people. But I believe in the longer run, it has very interesting features. I don't want to allude at this point in time, but I think that is going to create very interesting ecosystem, more transparency, more price discovery. Like Bitcoin, you can have only 21 million Bitcoins, right? Therefore, when the quantity is finite, you are able to do price discovery better. If it's only one Mona Lisa, I'll value at one price. If the 100, I can million different, right? So same way Bitcoin, because there is finite quantity, price discovery may be better. I'm saying maybe because I'm a lawyer, I'm not able to guarantee as an economist or somebody like that. So I think this is what we need to understand, that price discovery is also better. Today, rupee or other currency, if you can print more and more, I have no clue whether there will be more printing or less printing or how the currency will move. But at least I know here that 21 million Bitcoin, so there is a finite quantity. And of course, there are 10,000 different types of crypto. So we have to, I'm not getting into that, but on a broader policy, philosophical level, it seems if people look at, and in fact, even in the Supreme Court, we pointed out that this is an expression of freedom of speech and expression. Okay, because value expression is a free, and that is actually, even in India, in Greece, several places, I think this principle is also discussed, that when there is a currency, it is a medium to express your value. So there is a direct correlation to the freedom of speech and expression constitution. I don't want to go into technicalities, but I thought I'd stop here, and I've gone too long, looks like.
No, not at all. Your comments were very welcome, Mr. Desai. I think we're still waiting for Mr. Patnaik, so I'll keep the discussion going, and then as and when Mr. Patnaik joins in, we'll get into the policy perspective. Debayan, I have two questions for you. One is that, we've often heard policymakers, both the regulator, that's the RBI, and the government say that, look, we understand the usefulness of the underlying blockchain technology. It is the cryptocurrencies that we have our reservations about. Firstly, how useful is that approach? As a technologist, when you hear that approach, what is your response?
I think it's an approach in the sense that if they're going to regulate, the applications of blockchain are myriad. Okay. So not all cryptocurrencies need to be based on blockchains, by the way. There are many underlying technologies. And there are many kinds of things. Bitcoin operates on so-called proof of work, there's proof of stake, there's like 15 other things. And you do need to understand and regulate them differently. There is no one size fits all for this stuff. But before you get to your second question, I will underscore something that Mr. Desai just said, which is, I think, was very, very important, which is, people have this perspective that cryptocurrency, it's all shrouded in mystery and sort of hidden away. So there's two things to be said there. First, he's absolutely correct. It is more public than most of the stuff that we do, right? Like I said, it's a public ledger. everything's available for everyone to see. You can see every single transaction with most of these systems, which is kind of cool. But the other part of this to understand is when you're comparing two things, I'm saying, okay, this one is public. What about the reality? If you're talking about, Ponzi schemes, money being stolen and so on and so forth. And we all know that, with normal currency, normal bank accounts, so many people getting their money stolen all the time. I went to the bank yesterday. There was some old woman sitting next to me who was decrying, I got one phone call. They asked me to install this software and suddenly all my money is gone. Right? And we've heard so many of these stories over the course of the pandemic. And she went to the police and all, nothing happened. Right? Now, this is not just true in India, this is true across the world. So people will begin to ask that, okay, you're telling me that this is somehow unsafe. How is my real money also safe? If you're saying this is nakli money, this is fake money, and this is unsafe, my real money is also not safe. What are you talking about? Right? So, especially in the case of these systems, I think the regulation, as Mr. Desai said, has to be on the platforms and making sure that illicit use is controlled, which, by the way, is also going to be a huge challenge because of the global nature of these currencies, right? So there's a lot of research and thinking that needs to be done in order to control for that, because, the Indian government can control certain things about the Indian rupee and how exchange rates occur, and they have all of these policy levers to pull and push. But these systems, like I said before, they are built from the bottom up to be decentralized. You can't really have a single authority on top that is pressing buttons and making people do things. It is run by the wisdom of the crowd. Now, some people might say crowds have very little wisdom. That's why mobs form. But there is something to be said for the yearning for that, instead of who are these people sitting in some economist chair somewhere making all the decisions for us, right? So there is something to be said for that.
In fact,
we had a central banker on this panel, but we don't. Yes, Mr. Desai.
Yeah, very quickly, one thing you mentioned, it's a technology term, but from other perspective, if you look at, Bitcoins, if it would not have been called Bitcoin, but Bitpoint, most of these problems perhaps would never have come to light. If you see, these are loyalty points for whatever, Now, if you see single biggest or financial market outside RBI control or government control is loyalty point. It started with airline to airline, then they partner with other airline. You can then to hotels, to silverware, American Express. Today you can do anything with points. Okay, this is single thing outside, and there are how many thousands of loyalty points. Similarly, the thousands of currencies. So I think we are coming to grips where people will figure out what are the benefits of particular loyalty point or otherwise. Tata has come up with Nuvo now, right? Consolidated loyalty point kind of thing. Now, how would those systems work if we do not allow the system to flourish? And it's going to become very tricky. So as I mentioned, that if this would not have been called Bitcoin, perhaps half the things would not have happened, that we are seeing.
So do you think then, Mr. Desai, that is the problem, that, monetary systems are so sacrosanct, currency is so sacrosanct, as Debayan was mentioning, to nations and to way the economies function, that fear is, sort of what the RBI and the government are not being able to overcome. I know the Supreme Court sort of said that the test of proportionality doesn't hold in the ban that they had imposed. But now, even after the Supreme Court's order, they're doing everything in their power to ensure that the financial system stays at a distance from the crypto universe.
See, it is their job to show to the people that we have done everything that is under our control. Because it is not 99% good thing that are happening, but one bad thing holds them up. So bureaucrats always work with a sense of fear, and sometimes, and these days, after retirement, they are caught up. Okay. So they don't want to take any chance that I did something, I want to make my seat comfortable, no risk. Okay. So that is what is a typical situation that we are seeing in India. A lot of indecisiveness, mainly because they are a little afraid as to somebody will hold me up for what I don't understand this technology. Something goes like, as you know, one from 2012-13, we are specializing and we have studied this space. It was 2016-17. Somebody played a Ponzi scheme. Now, how can you blame RBI? Although they know they might lose the case, but still they have to show that they took some action. I think this is where we are settled. But world over, this is going on. But other governments have moved so fast forward. I was speaking at Milken conference just a few weeks ago, and the huge interest in crypto. Entire Miami now, forget about other countries, but Miami is full of crypto now, and a lot of new derivative products, new innovative products, new applications, and all those things are happening. Okay, World Bank has been playing with the idea of learning coin, okay, for education, testing, and stuff like that. World Food Program is linked now, crypto and all that thing. So there are many good use cases which are ignored because we have made up our mind that, okay, we don't want crypto, we'll be doing something wrong. But if you look at other countries that have done a lot, they're moving fast forward. For example, UAE, okay, all said and done, entire crypto business has shifted to UAE. There is no difference with Mumbai and Dubai now. Okay, a lot of people have moved. Now, one would say whatever happens, happens, but I'm not concerned. So we missed out an industrial revolution. Okay, there is another industrial revolution 4 and also Web 3.0 and all the things are coming up. I think we have to just make sure that we allow a lot of sandboxes experiments to happen. Okay, and at the speed of thought. So how Canada is handling, how Dubai is handling, how Switzerland has done it, how US itself, right? So we have to apply our mind rather than one brush to everything and then go about. So I think we have to be more pragmatic, and I would not, I think, take too much time at this point in time if Amar has come in already.
I don't believe he has actually. I don't think he's still joined. So I'll go to Debayan with the second question I had. Debayan, when you hear the argument that there is no underlying in cryptocurrencies, and that being a large part of the discomfort that policymakers have as well, lends itself to volatility perhaps. How do you see that argument that the lack of underlying is the problem here, and hence we must protect investors?
So there are sort of three things there. One argument is to say, as was mentioned already, what's underlying anything at the end of the day? The question is, I'm going to give you, a 3-minute spiel on this. A long time ago, trust was direct person to person, right? If I lived in a village and I needed a chair made, I would go to the nearby chairperson because I knew that person's family, and they wouldn't run away after taking my advance because I know his mother or whatever, right? So it was individual trust. As people started moving around, then we started having institutional trust, which is, I move to a new city, which bank will I put my money in? I'll put my money in this bank because I know they have a good brand. Everyone trusts this bank, right? Now we've moved to something else. Now we've come into this hybrid trust model where if I see a review on Zomato or Amazon and I see this restaurant is 4.8 rated or something like that, then it's not Zomato that is doing that rating. It's not Amazon that is doing that rating. They are a platform on which they have collated that rating. So now I'm trusting individuals again, but via an institution, right? So the nature of trust itself has been changing behind our backs all this time. Now, when we're talking about currency and the value that this piece of paper has, people understand it. We've been developing it for thousands of years, right? This is a new kind of trust. And here you are no longer trusting that there is a central bank authority which is doing it. You are trusting this collation of individuals, right? Now, whether that will work out or not is impossible to say. I think it will work out to some extent, whether in the particular instantiation of a particular cryptocurrency named Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, God knows, right? But it's just a different kind of trust, just like the types that we talked about before, right? So the trust itself, the nature of trust that we have is changing. So when you say something has value, why does, there are certain things that have industrial applications perhaps, but why does a piece of art have value? I look at a Rothko painting, I see 3 squares and I'm like, this is a joke. It's a lie. What is this nonsense? I could have painted better, but clearly I couldn't have. My paintings are not selling for $80 million or whatever. So for something to have value, eventually you just need enough people to agree that it has a certain amount of value. And that comes with trust. It comes with future vision, belief that it will keep a certain amount of value, and so on and so forth. And that kind of trust can be built not just from individual trust. I might invest in you because I think you're a good person. It might come from institutional trust. I might invest in you because I think you're a good institution. It might come from hybrid trust. I go to this restaurant because it has a good rating. Or it might come from this kind of crowdsourced trust that we are building with these Bitcoin, Ethereum systems, right? So there is that. The second part, when you're talking about this underlying value, there is some underlying value there, but sometimes there's effort conflated with value, right? If I bang my head against a wall, there is effort, but not necessarily value, right? And certain people have criticized specifically Bitcoin for the amount of just electricity consumption and climate change, because it's doing essentially busy work while it's generating these proofs. So one needs to see whether that particular currency will work or something else will work when it comes to scaling properly for the world of tomorrow, right? And third is, when you're building these kinds of currencies, and this is why I think the Indian government has been thinking about this central bank digital currency and so forth, is that you need proper penetration. It cannot be, if you want people to really experiment and the currency to flourish and create all these derivative ideas and so on and so forth, you need the first year college student coming from a very poor background from a backward district in a state to be able to dream and think about this stuff clearly. And in order to do that, you need proper penetration of these technologies, right? How do you manage that without making people vulnerable? And that's a hard regulatory problem which we'll need to solve. Digital divide, so on and so forth. That I am too small to even think about properly.
Actually, I'm going to start blending in some of the questions that are coming in alongside, some of them are along the lines that we are discussing in any case. So this one to you, Ms. Nishith, I think the question that is being hotly debated as to who regulates if we decide to regulate. I think Deepak Joshi has a question on the way forward on regulations. Can it be treated as a security, as a special class with its own set of regulations? Does it fall under SEBI? Does it fall under RBI? Will it have to be a hybrid? If at all we move in the direction of regulation and not decide to fully ban it? Mr. Desai, I think you're on mute, sir.
Sorry. Okay. So the way in which I look at is that what is the characterization of the crypto? Is it a currency? Okay, it is. So when we looked at it long ago, say first of all, Bitcoin is not a coin. It doesn't fall under Coinage Act. It is not money. It is not currency. It is not foreign exchange. Okay, it is not foreign currency either, and so on and so forth, right? So it is not, and RBI has also indicated that it is not a currency. Number two, but some countries have begun to classify this as a currency, El Salvador and some other countries, right? Second, that is it a security? Depends on the context. Okay, how you are, what is underlying in NFT or other kind of crypto you to get. So in some cases, whether it is security or not also is contextual. And third thing is whether it is an asset. And as you know, asset could also include currency. It could also include security. But other than currency and security, it is an asset. So it is, or you can own it, you can transfer it, you can use it and stuff like that. So currently the characterization is done in multiple ways. And one looks at it and, and then figures out what is the kind of character. So some countries have taken, whether in crypto at one point, tokenization, and what is the token, what is behind token. So there is a derivative interpretation of the whole thing. Who should control it? Who should rather regulate that? At this point in time, what we have said, because there is no clarity on the kind of the asset it is. Okay. First of all, self-regulations must be accepted by the government till such time it comes out with regulations. But more importantly, we have recommended that there should be crypto regulatory and development authority, just as we have IRDA, not just regulatory, because if you regulate, you will strangulate the technology or other development as well. But if the role is dual, then we'll promote, at the same time we'll take care of the dark side of the whole game, right? So again, our view has been that we should have crypto regulatory and development authority. In Dubai, they have come up with VARA, Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority. Of course, the regulations have not fully been framed. They're going on. Other countries are just looking at it. So, but I believe that it would be very important for a regulator to play the role of development authority as well. I think that would be more appropriate than, SEBI or otherwise. Because again, SEBI has so many things to handle. I do not know what capacity, competencies they have at this point in time to handle this. RBI is settled with so many things. Okay. So best thing is somebody who understands the technology, who understands the upside and the downside, and how do you, work around that. It would be greatly beneficial and things will move fast forward. We are already missing out a lot in this crypto space at this point in time. That's what I can see around the world.
I think we should have Mr. Patnaik. But sorry, Deepak.
I think Mr. Patnaik has joined, but he is in the participant group. So I'm just asking my IT team to upgrade him, but he is already in and he's able to listen to us, but we can't listen to him.
Okay.
I guess we can continue the discussion.
I think he's there now. So if we just give it a minute, we might be able to.
Yeah, thank you so much. Sorry for juggling between two webinars. Actually, the other one I was already committed to, which was an international webinar on infectious diseases. Actually, so.
Lovely to have you, Dr. Patnaik. Thank you for joining us. I won't summarize what we've been discussing, but the point of the discussion was actually apt for you to come in. We were debating regulation and the nature of regulation. So let me first hand the floor over to you. The other panelists have sort of opened by sharing their perspective on the technology, on the sort of industry perspective. We'd love to hear from you on the sort of evolving policymaker perspective and where we are at right now as far as the cryptocurrency space.
Tarun, I was working a lot with African civil society.
Yeah, so I thought I will just a minute. Yeah, thank you so much. So I'll just, since I think I just heard Mr. Desai was speaking about the regulation, about SEBI's competency. See, overall, I would just say we have had these several rounds of discussion with various stakeholders in the crypto ecosystem, in the Standing Committee on Finance, and even separately in many of these kind of webinars, and have had even interaction with the Coinbase promoter, Brian Armstrong, who was visiting India. But the point is, the basic issues of risk and concern which has been raised by the Reserve Bank of India as well as the Government of India are the issues of money laundering, relating to cross-border money laundering, volatility. More important than volatility is the terror financing and the lack of transparency. So many of these issues can actually be addressed because of the inherent strength of the blockchain technology itself. Somehow, there is a lack of knowledge on the part of the various government agencies, as well as people like me, who are members of parliament, on this front. So I think a lot of work has to be done on that front. But the crypto players themselves have also not done anything better in addressing these concerns, and we have told this several times to them in the informal groups that we met in Bangalore or various places as a part of the Standing Committee on Finance. So they have to do much more to address this concern in particular ways and convince the people that these are issues which can be addressed either through KYC or by bringing in appropriate provisions in the PMLA or in the FEMA. All these things can be done, which hasn't been done. The second aspect is the fact that, this huge talk about, if there is a ban, it will kill innovation. But what is this innovation? What are these innovations? What is this killer innovation which can improve the lives of human beings? Except trading in the platforms. There could be many other applications where blockchain and the crypto as a use case can be used for, let's say, smart contracts in land deals, in revenue administration. It can improve the ease of doing business, ease of governance itself. Now, these are the things which are probably not being advocated properly by the crypto stakeholders. Not to say that the government shouldn't be discussing this independently through separate experts, which is already happening, I believe, in Niti Aayog and other places. Then the third point which I would like to make is the fact that the regulatory vacuum which is there, which is known to all, whether with SEBI or with the RBI, can probably be addressed by having these sandboxes, regulatory sandboxes, by both SEBI, and this is what again I had proposed. The stance taken by the Reserve Bank of India that it needs to be banned is something which I can't agree, because even if you ban that, you don't have the regulatory capacity to enforce that ban, because this is peer-to-peer technology. Even if you don't want, it can happen. And if too many players, both buyers and sellers, join the thing, it is anyway going to affect the financial stability and the macroeconomic stability of the country, for that matter, the world. So I have always articulated it separately that the most important thing for currently is in line with what our finance minister and prime minister have said, and also in line with what the IMF has been saying. We need to have put in place a principle-based international order. And then, when this order is set by, let's say, G7 or G23, then all the countries will probably model their regulations on the basis of that. And then there is respect for that, those principles across jurisdictions and across boundaries. Otherwise, the technology is such that it could be cashed out, it could be the currency could be purchased at some place and cashed out at somewhere else. The idea of no fundamental value being there is something that has to be addressed, whether it is in terms of the number of hours that the machine has run, the energy has been put, or the crypto miners have worked. Something has to come out in this. So I think there's a lot of lack of clarity on this subject, which has to be addressed. And only then I think the regulators would feel confident to regulate. And so that's what is, I think, the call of the day. And our country, probably, Singapore has all those three separate regulations. I had asked this question to the next highest authority in Singapore who handles this, and if there were violations, or let's say if there were cases in which there was fraud that had happened, and then how they were prosecuted. So there was just one case they mentioned, and they didn't give the details. But unless you have a very clearly laid out prosecution, if there is a case where there are frauds or there are problems in cash out, liquidity mismatches, then how do you address these issues? So I think I'm not in support of a ban per se, because you can't enforce it. It is meaningless, actually. But at the same time, we have to be extremely careful. But being careful doesn't mean just to delay it as much as possible, because technology moves very, very fast. What is relevant yesterday may not be relevant today. Even in the crypto ecosystem, using the blockchain innovations or the technology is moving very fast. So we have very little time, and I think we just can't close our eyes. As I said, the Wave3 technology itself doesn't lend itself to any kind of central regulation. And therefore, even if you ban it, it makes no sense. So better to accept it and think about ways and means of having a graded regulation, which the way we evolved our IBC, we learned and kept on changing the IBC law. Similarly, use a regulatory sandbox, both in SEBI as well as in RBI for currency or securities as you decide, and then evolve. And if there is a need for a separate hybrid regulator, then probably establish it. But just can't close your eyes to it.
So, Dr. Patnaik, if one has to list out sort of the hierarchy of concerns from a policy-making perspective, would you say top of those is, sort of money laundering, terror financing, or the interplay of cryptocurrencies with FEMA regulations? Next, perhaps comes customer protection, because, as we were discussing earlier, there have been a lot of young people who have been attracted to this, although perhaps in small values. And perhaps the third concern, more on paper than in reality, is whether this challenges sort of the monetary sovereignty, of the economy. Would you say that those are the three concerns and those should be tackled in different buckets?
Yes, I largely agree, except the fact that the third point, which is about sovereignty, even though the crypto market, asset market, has grown about 3.5 times, it reaches about 2.73 trillion US dollars. So I don't think it's still a minuscule portion. So I think we shouldn't interpret it as if it is going to affect the sovereignty. And that is precisely the reason why I'm saying that we need to have an international order, in which case countries can decide. So if a currency has been purchased in X country where the regulation is very strong or there is a ban, but the cash out takes place in a place where there is a legal tender like El Salvador, then what? How do you control it? How do you stop this? You can't. So if there is an international agreement on this, however, then I think it can be regulated properly. So that concern can be addressed through these international regulation, as I said. But more importantly, for this entire transactions to take place in a frictionless manner across geographies, you need this international order. And that would be my take on it. As regards the first two, yes, they are very valid concerns, but I also am convinced that those concerns can, mitigating measures can be put in place, and that can happen only when you are thinking that you are able to put a regulation. Banning it is, as I said, you just can't enforce that ban, so it is meaningless.
Let me actually bring Debayan in briefly, and then Deepak, if you want to hand over for audience question and answers, I'll give it back to you. Debayan, this question about, you talked about it earlier, that actually you can track all transactions if you had to. Yet when one hears from the industry, and I'm sure Dr. Patnaik also would have had this experience, the industry throws up its hands if you ask them for, say, origin of cryptocurrencies. There's a question about how cryptocurrency is actually coming into India, and the exchanges will tell you, we don't know, we can't track it. So there's a bit of a dichotomy around what the technology allows and what the ecosystem says it can do.
I think, by the way, that Mr. Desai wanted to say something.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Desai, if you want to jump in, please do before I go to Debayan. I missed it.
Yeah. You're on mute, Mr. Desai.
Yeah, lawyers usually don't speak up fast because unless they speak for it. So
apologies, Mr. Desai. I missed your hand.
Sorry about it. So, and we won't ask Bitcoins, just for information. But I was just trying to, I think, echo what Mr. Amar Patnaik mentioned. There are serious concerns, no doubt about it. There has to be regulations, right? And of course, international order has to be established. But I think if you try to establish international order, it is going to take a few years. What we have done, and actually we've put in a lot of work in writing self-regulations. What we are telling government is that while you are framing rules, let industry be disciplined with self-regulations. And at least all our clients first principle, we said nobody will take any cash money. At least all the organized players, if you see today, they don't do that. Okay, KYC norm, passport information, whatever KYC is required. And also, if you see the disclaimers, they said that in the event government requires certain information, we may hand it over. Okay, so those kind of things, I would not go into detail, but we have given very detailed regulation, including for the user technology, including for other kind of stuff. I would suggest that take a look at it. We can still improve because this was done about 3 years ago, so there will be some developments, but at least there is some framework we have provided, and let industry go with self-regulations. And then in the meanwhile, develop regulatory framework, because when you develop regulatory framework in too much of a hurry, again, there is a possibility of tripping and missing out something. So it is better, let them develop, understand what's going on, improve on, suppose you want to improve something on self-regulations, do it. And then in the meanwhile, international order, like IOSCO, for example, of course, it's for securities law, but I'm just mentioning some authority could come up. More and more countries are coming up with, as I said, authority for digital assets, right? So I think, and connect with those developed jurisdictions, they are all concerned about the same issues. US was not immune from September 11. Okay, India is not immune from similar situation. Number of Pakistan is not immune. Everybody is concerned about it. So it is not our case alone that we are worried about terrorists. But if you look at, there are a number of laws in India. Fortunately, India has a good legal system, at least maybe imperfect, if not perfect. But we have some system. So there are anti-money laundering laws. There are suspicious transaction laws. There are black money laws. There are other laws. There are many laws which, if you properly organize and put in a framework, you are able to nail down any wrongdoing by and large. And if there are some gaps, including consumer protection, we have dealt with. Okay. And those kind of things we need to just improve and start working on it, so we do not miss out on the benefits. And there are a number of use cases that, including World Bank, as I was mentioning earlier, that learning coin, other kind of stuff. I believe Maharashtra government, or they've got the Maharashtra Skill Development Corporation, has been issuing certificates with the blockchain technology and stuff like that. Because again, as all of us know, that blockchain, at least not public, but it is by and large all public, but blockchain will not exist without crypto. And what happens to crypto miners, what happens? So people don't need to, if we can be little open and be quick, because we have already given a lot of food on the platter. And if that could be looked at quickly and get something going. So there is some method in madness. I'm not saying it's going to be perfect well, but self-regulations already have been submitted. If people can look at it and we move fast forward, all of us are in sync, as Mr. Patnaik mentioned, that banning is not an option. So what is the option? Option is to look at other measures, okay, which are less intrusive, as Supreme Court mentioned in its order, right? And at the same time, it serves a purpose. That's how the balanced system will come. And, and I believe even out of 30, 40 unicorns, 2 are in crypto at this point in time. So again, I'm not being judgmental here. I'm not, but I'm saying that there are definitely huge advantages. Metaverse, we just had a major conference done on Metaverse. Metaverse is going to be, we'll miss out Metaverse if we don't handle crypto. So again, that is a new opportunity coming in front of us, and we don't want to miss out, Also in Gift City, we have been working in fixed sandboxes there. Again, we can be a little more relaxed. So long as Indian public is not impacted, we can be a little more liberal. And I think there are ways to, we'll be happy to help, no problem.
Dr. Patnaik, well, how would you respond to that? A broad sort of self-regulatory framework where there are bits and pieces of regulation or laws that can apply. For instance, we've done that with taxation. We've done that with, advertising standards. So attack some of these pieces and broadly let the industry self-regulate. Could that work? Dr. Patnaik?
I'm not sure he can hear. In the meantime, perhaps I can quickly come in and answer the previous question that you'd asked me about, this contrast between what they're supposed to be able to do and what they seem to be doing.
Yeah.
Right? One way to think about it is if you imagine me sending money to you via email. Imagine we could send money via email, right? So I just email you money and you email somebody else money. And you know how easy it is to create random email addresses.
Yeah.
So even if there is a public document or Google releases that or somebody else releases that saying money was sent from abc1@gmail.com to efgh63@yahoo.co.in and money was sent from here to here, you look at it and, Debayan could have 1,500 different email addresses and send them back and forth all the time, right? And if you have different email providers, suddenly it becomes almost impossible to trace all of this stuff going on. Right? But you can solve it. You can say, wait, before you do your email, you need to show me your passport or Aadhaar card, whatever, blah, 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 blah. But then comes the question of how secure is your passport or Aadhaar card, etc. But you can link it to other things. So right now what we have, and this is very, very different between different crypto players. There are many, especially the ones in India, are pretty solid by now in terms of requiring KYC and this, that, and the other, right? But because of the money in market, so to speak, it is still quite possible to move money around. And there are a lot of organizations which allow, let's say, mixers, right? There are these organizations called mixers where, let's say, I don't want my money to be traced. So what I'll do is, all of us on this call, we send a certain amount of money to abc@gmail.com. And we tell them, send this money in smaller chunks to these other addresses. And then you can't, it's literally money laundering. But these services exist. And the thing with these services is that they are cryptographically protected. You can't it's very hard to block them directly. Now, there are people who are working against it. It's a bit of a cat and mouse game. And the thing is, you shouldn't look at it any differently than you look at real world systems. In the real world, it's not as if we are capturing everyone in the tax bracket, right? Like, there's a lot of evasion, there's a lot of jugaad, there's a lot of other stuff taking place. The question is, can we mitigate the worst aspects of these things while protecting the most vulnerable people in the population, right? And how bad, what is the cost-benefit ratio here? And until we get a grasp on that, it's really hard to reason about it. In my personal opinion, there is a lot of benefit to be had in opening up the space, but simultaneously, we need to have a lot of clear regulation on sort of people getting their savings taken away, that sort of thing. There's so many scams going on right now, especially these mining pool scams. I know so many people who've lost all their savings, right? And they have no one to turn to. So the government and private entities themselves need to self-police and help these people. And we need to have some, if not regulation sort of pointers, regulate in this direction sort of frameworks that help them form good ways to deal with those kinds of situations.
I think we have Dr. Patnaik back with us. Dr. Patnaik, I think we've lost you for a minute. The point that Mr. Desai was making in response to your initial remarks was that can we move ahead with a broadly sort of self-regulatory kind of structure while tackling different aspects of cryptocurrencies? In some ways, we've done that, where we've taken care of the tax part, we've taken care of the advertising part. Do you think that kind of format could at least exist at the current juncture, where in the larger scheme of things, cryptocurrencies are still small?
No, of course, self-regulation is good, but the point is that it is just like the chit funds. The chit funds which they operated initially, they were also they went through the Self-Help Cooperative Societies Act, in which there was no very light touch regulation from government, and then they were supposed to administer themselves. Now, you could ask me that what is the problem if suppose there is an investor who gets duped? Normally, the government has no role to play because no one asked him to go and invest there in the chit fund. But what has happened, we have seen in the chit fund, Sharda fund, or anywhere in the entire eastern part of India, is that finally the investors, retail investors, they come back to government and say that you didn't regulate it properly, and we have to create a corpus fund from out of taxpayers' money and again start paying to them. So self-regulation, I think in the absence of regulation, that's the best way. But I think a better way would be if there is if the regulator is identified, let's say in this case RBI and SEBI, and they start a regulatory sandbox, because it is they who are going to ultimately do it. The self-regulation would actually supplement this particular effort. But let me also caution by saying that I'm not naming the exchanges. But recently, during an interaction, we found that they did not have, they had evaded GST, they had evaded income tax. These were brought to the notice of the Standing Committee on Finance. So I think that again raises the hackles of the government much more. But I would still say that if they do regulation, self-regulation properly, it will give confidence for the government to come out with a formal regulation quickly. But the regulatory sandbox that the prospective regulators, if called upon to regulate, they must start employing them, because currently the RBI's regulatory sandbox takes away the virtual digital assets from being included in the sandbox. No, that kind of an approach, I think, needs to change.
Dr. Patnaik, how close are we to some sort of consensus within the policy sphere? Because it does seem like you hear different agencies give very different an understanding of where things are. The RBI, for instance, continues to say that we're absolutely dead against it. The government is more or less on the same page. The RBI governor recently said, I'm not sure what the Standing Committee's official view was, whether the Finance Ministry is on board with that or has a third view. How close are we within India to reach some sort of consensus?
See, the point is that it depends on how you look at the crypto. If you're looking at a currency, it purely as a currency, then of course RBI's view is predominant, and RBI has been saying that they will come out with a CBDC, and I again support that completely, because if a CBDC comes, it gives the strength to the RBI to understand this particular. It is a public, it's not a private crypto asset, but it's a public crypto asset. It's a fiat currency, so it understands technology, it understands how to regulate. I think it should come out very quickly. But if you look at treat crypto assets as a security or as a commodity, then I think the regulator is different. And in which case, I think reaching a common consensus is easier. But even to reach this particular consensus, that whether to treat it as an asset or whether to treat it as a commodity or to allow both, that requires a lot of time. So I think no one is clear about how to go about it. Various thoughts have started coming, but Honorable Finance Minister has said in Parliament, which I had talked about regulatory capacity, and by imposing this particular tax, I think the intention that is coming out from government is that it will not hesitate to regulate once clarity comes, but there will not be a hasty decision, because no one should come back to the government to say that if there is a terror funding detected later or money laundering detected later, we are unable to prosecute them because we don't have an audit trail of what's happening and who to catch. So I think these are the issues which will have to be addressed. And that's why I said that the crypto players must address these issues instead of only keeping on advocating about innovation without mentioning what is the exact innovation that they are thinking of for giving benefit to the people of this country.
Deepak, can I hand back to you for audience questions that you may want to put across?
Yeah, Ira, we are far ahead, beyond our 1 hour allotted time. And I know that some of the panelists had committed to an hour, so I think we should wrap it up. You did cover a lot of questions that was asked on the Q&A. So I think we are in good shape to wrap up. Do you want to do that, or do you want me to do it?
Over to you then.
Okay, now thank you very much, Dr. Patnaik, Mr. Desai, Debayan, and Ira for a wonderful discussion. I thought this is a topic which doesn't lend itself to any kind of consensus. Mr. Desai, do you want to speak something?
Yeah, I think just add to what Mr. Patnaik said, because today it's completely unregulated. I would suggest that at least allow people to get some kind of a license or authority, those who agree to adhere to the self-regulations. I'm not suggesting it's an interim step. Okay. And number two, it could be properly audited and stuff like that. So at least people will understand that these processes are followed and stuff like that. So today everybody is working in dark, and then illegal things that are going on, they will go on. You don't need regulators. So I'm suggesting at least as a starting point, if the government could allow or give some kind of filing with the authorities, whichever we want to, in the interim, this is a very preliminary early stage thing so that industry can flourish in a legitimate, open, transparent way. That is what is the objective at the end of the day, because, and at least people have some recourse to different laws and stuff like that, which all could be consolidated and put in the proper framework. Because there is must be something done. We have been struggling with this for, as I said, first case we handled was 2013. Okay, it's almost 9 years, right? So we are still debating one way or the other. And if you look for international consensus, which I'm happy, but it will still take 3 to 5 years. So what do we do in the interim? When sandbox, what will we do? We'll have to have some regulatory framework, some norms to behavioral norms for the companies, So my recommendation is something, let it come so that we don't there's a lot of innovation. We can have separate session on innovations that is going on a global basis. All the use case studies, wonderful. But that's a separate thing. But again, that was my recommendation, that in the interim, let industry get organized and do some small thing that we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Desai. I think, Ira, I took over prematurely. Do you want to go back? And Mr. Patnaik, do you want to respond?
No, I think well taken.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for coming in. I just wanted to say that I normally thought we won't reach to any consensus. I think because we don't have an RBI person in the panel, and we did invite RBI to come in, they said everything we have to say has already been said on this topic in public. But let me just say 4 things that I took away from this. I think the first important point I took away, which was kind of Mr. Patnaik, Dr. Patnaik said, is India can't close its eyes to this asset. So it seems like none of the panelists would actually support a banning crypto assets. So that was kind of one takeaway. I think second was, I did hear everybody saying that there are considerable benefits that could come through opening this sector, but much more cautiously. Third is that industry needs to do a much better job in terms of explaining the use cases, not just the trading and things that we already know, but more developmental impact of crypto assets. And finally, I think this is where perhaps there is not enough consensus as to how do we have more regulatory clarity, what do we do in the intermediate period versus in the long term. But there is sufficiently, India has significant legal depth as well as regulatory capacity to be able to handle it. And so it seems like there's a lot more optimism on this panel on this topic than I thought when we started having this discussion. But thank you very much. And thank you, Ira, for a wonderful moderation. And thanks to my colleagues in ICRIER who helped to put together this event.
Thank you so
and
much.
Good night.
Thank you.